year is 1291. A once formidable empire stands in ruins. The once great Persian cities of Bukhara, Samar, and Nishapur are reduced to smoldering ashes, its scholars silenced, its legions broken, its citizens erased. And it all began not with a sword, but with a single diplomatic blunderant offense delivered in the halls of diplomacy, not on the battlefield. This is the nearly forgotten tale of how pride, betrayal, and underestimating a nomadic warlord sparked one of the most ruthless purges in recorded history. A saga of retribution that redrew the boundaries of the known world of a Khan who united the fractured tribes of the steppe and unleashed them like a tempest upon the cradle of civilization. One insult turned into a massacre. One empire disappeared overnight. And from its remnants, the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known emerged. This is the account of Genghis Khan's wrath, of the empire arrogant enough to challenge him and how it was erased from existence, the realm that dared defy Genghis Khan and cease to exist. The year is 1221 modern-day Iran. The towering walls of Nishapur, once proud symbols of resilience and wealth, groan and crumble beneath the relentless assault of Mongol siege weapons. Within mere hours, ancient ramparts disintegrate like sun-dried clay. Through the breach, Mongol warriors flood in, their arrows darkening the sky like a malevolent cloud. What follows is not a battle, nor is it a conquest in the classical sense. It is annihilation. In a few days, what had been a bustling urban center filled with craftsmen, scholars, and traders becomes a lifeless ruin. The people of Nishapur, women and children, disappear into history's void. But Nishapur was only one of many. An entire civilization, its cities, its culture, its accumulated wisdom systematically dismantled. By the time Genghis Khan concluded his campaign against the Khwarazmian Empire, nearly a quarter of the Persian populace had been wiped out, 1 in 4 gone. The magnitude of the devastation remains so profound that historians still count it among the most destructive military operations ever recorded. How did this happen? How did one of the Islamic world's most affluent, expansive, and seemingly impregnable empires collapse in mere months? The answer lies not in military might, but in one catastrophic diplomatic failure, a moment of hubris that set in motion one of history's most lethal upheavals. Long before the Mongol armies swept across its lands, the Khwarazmian Empire had reached the height of its power. Spanning from the Aral Sea to the Persian Gulf, from today's Iraq to the edge of India, was no backwater realm. It was a global force, commanding critical Silk Road trade routes that bound east and west, yielding immense riches. The mastermind behind this empire was Ala ad-Din Muhammad II, better known as Shah Muhammad. Through military ambition and political maneuvering, he expanded Khwarazm from a minor power into a vast dominion. By 1218, the Khwarazmian Empire encompassed legendary metropolises like Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, and Nishapur, renowned centers of scholarship and innovation. This was a civilization where intellectual brilliance thrived, where figures like Omar Khayyam and Avicenna had once transformed the worlds of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The empire's cities dazzled visitors, vibrant bazaars brimming with spices, silk, and gems, majestic mosques with turquoise domes, and vast libraries that housed thousands of priceless manuscripts. Its military was equally imposing, with over 400,000 troops, including some of the most elite Turkish cavalry in the Islamic world. On the surface, Khwarazm appeared unstoppable, but beneath its gilded exterior, it was deeply fractured. The empire's rapid expansion had left many regions tenuously loyal at best. The Shah's own commanders often ignored his authority, acting more like autonomous warlords than loyal subjects. At the heart of this delicate political structure was Shah Muhammad himself, entangled in power struggles, including with his powerful mother, Turkan Khatun. She commanded significant provinces on her own, while Turkish generals jostled for control and influence. Meanwhile, to the east, a new force was gaining momentum, a threat the world had yet to fully comprehend. The Mongols, Once disunited clans roaming the harsh Eurasian steppe had by 1218 been unified under a single formidable leader, Genghis Khan. They had already swept across northern China and Central Asia with breathtaking speed and unmatched ferocity, forging an empire unlike anything the world had seen. Yet, in contrast to the common narrative, Genghis Khan's initial overture to the Khwarazmian Empire was not one of aggression. He viewed the prosperous Islamic realm not as a target, but as a prospective ally. His focus at the time was securing stability in the east, especially over his newly acquired Chinese territories. In a bid for diplomacy, Genghis Khan sent a trade mission westward in 1218 loaded with goods and accompanied by a cordial message. "I am the sovereign of the lands where the sun rises," he wrote. "You govern where the sun sets. Let us forge a bond of peace and friendship." Had this diplomatic gesture been honored, the course of history might have been rewritten. But events soon spiraled out of control. The flashpoint was Otrar, a frontier city on Khwarazm's northeastern boundary. A Mongol caravan of 450 merchants arrived, hoping to initiate trade just as Genghis Khan had proposed. But the city's governor, Inalchuk, who was also the Shah's uncle, saw things differently. Paranoid by nature, Inalchuk suspected the caravan of espionage, believing the merchants to be scouts for a looming Mongol invasion. While it's true that Mongol traders occasionally acted as informants, Inalchuk's reaction was extreme. He ordered the entire delegation imprisoned and later executed in public. Reports say they were mass beheaded, and their valuable cargo gold, silk, jade, and fur seized for the governor's personal gain. When this brutal incident reached Genghis Khan, he didn't immediately retaliate with war. Instead, he responded diplomatically, dispatching a formal envoy to Shah Muhammad's court. The Mongol envoys delivered a letter demanding justice, calling for the punishment of Inalchuk and compensation for the slain merchants. "I seek no war," Genghis Khan wrote, "but you have chosen one." With that, Shah Muhammad stood at a crossroads that would determine the destiny of his empire. His military council was divided. Some advocated caution, acknowledging the Mongols' escalating strength. Yet others, including his mother Turkan Khatun, dismissed them outright as primitive nomads unworthy foes for the cultured power of Khwarazm. Instead of opting for diplomacy or preparing adequately for an inevitable conflict, the Shah made the gravest error imaginable. In an act even more outrageous than the mass execution of the traitors, he ordered the lead Mongol envoy to be killed. The remaining two were publicly humiliated. Their beards, sacred symbols among the steppe peoples, were forcibly shaven before they were sent back to Genghis Khan as living symbols of disgrace. In the world of 13th century international diplomacy, this act was tantamount to a full declaration of war. Envoys, regarded as inviolable from Europe to Asia, were off limits to violence. Shah Muhammad had crossed a threshold no ruler dared breach. When the humiliated diplomats returned to Genghis Khan, the response was swift and merciless. According to Mongol sources, the Khan withdrew alone to a sacred hilltop. There, he removed his hata sign of reverence and spent an entire day in silent meditation, communing with the heavens, seeking direction and vengeance. Upon descending, his decision was resolute. "The eternal blue sky has entrusted me with a task," he proclaimed to his commanders, "to cast down the mighty and uplift the lowly." And so began the reckoning. Winter 1219. The Mongol military machine was set into motion. From the icy plains of Central Asia, Genghis Khan gathered a force of 100,000 to 150,000 seasoned warriors. Although numerically inferior to the forces of Shah Muhammad, the Mongols compensated with terrifying precision, unified command, and brutal discipline. Each Mongol fighter was molded from youth in the arts of archery, horseback riding, and endurance. They each managed multiple horses, enabling the army to traverse immense distances with blinding speed. Their composite bows, capable of piercing armor at over 200 yards, proved deadly from both horseback and foot. But their true edge lay in their discipline. In contrast, the Khwarazmian military was fragmented, plagued by infighting and power-hungry generals who often acted autonomously. The Mongol ranks, in contrast, followed orders without hesitation, moving as a singular, relentless force. At the helm stood Genghis Khan himself, a military tactician of chilling genius. Rather than launching a single massive invasion, he adopted a strategy of disorientation and division. The Mongol army was split into several contingents, each assigned to strike a different region of the Khwarazmian Empire at once. The central column, under the Khan's personal leadership, advanced directly into the empire's core. His sons Chagatai and Ogedei were dispatched to Otrar place where the insult had first occurred, and where Governor Inalchuk still held sway. Meanwhile, his eldest son, Yochi, led a campaign into the Sir-Daria-Valya critical strategic artery to the north. But the most daring maneuver came from Genghis Khan's two most trusted commanders, Jebe and Subutai. With a mere 20,000 elite cavalry, they launched a bold flanking operation, cutting straight through the harsh, desolate terrain of the Kizilkum deserter path most believed no army could endure. But the Mongols were no ordinary warriors. This multi-pronged assault threw Shah Muhammad into chaos. He couldn't determine where the real threat lay. Was it emerging from the north, the east, or already lurking behind his lines? Paralyzed by uncertainty, the Shah made a fatal error. Instead of unifying his army for a decisive confrontation, he scattered his forces across several fortified cities, counting on the size of his empire and natural attrition to wear down the invaders. But this approach played perfectly into the Mongols' hands. Isolated and fragmented, the Khwarazmian defenses were overwhelmed one by one. Otrar was the first to fall. The siege stretched across 5 grueling months, but its end was inevitable. By February 1220, the city succumbed. Governor Inalchuk, the man whose reckless act had provoked the Mongols, was captured alive. His fate was both symbolic and gruesome. Molten silver was poured into his eyes and ears, a punishment for a man blinded and deafened by greed. Yet the Mongols were only beginning their campaign of destruction. As they advanced deeper into Khwarazmian territory, Genghis Khan employed not just brute strength, but psychological warfare of a kind the region had never witnessed. Before assaulting a city, his envoys would deliver an ultimatum: surrender immediately and receive mercy, or resist and face complete annihilation. The terror this strategy inspired was immense and effective. Supporting these threats was an arsenal of advanced siege equipment provided by Chinese engineers captured in earlier Mongol campaigns. Catapults, battering rams, and even redirected rivers were used to bring down walls thought impregnable. By the spring of 1220, the Mongol invasion had become a relentless storm. It swept through the Khwarazmian Empire with unstoppable force. City after city received the same stark choice: yield or be destroyed. Most chose resistance. Most were obliterated. Bukhara, a vital hub of Islamic learning and trade with a population exceeding 300,000, crumbled swiftly when its Turkish defenders deserted, abandoning the civilian population. Genghis Khan himself rode through the city's great mosque on horseback, a calculated insult, and pronounced, "I am the scourge of God. Had you not sinned so gravely, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." The promise of mercy dissolved into bloodshed. Thousands were butchered. Outside the city, the survivors were captured and enslaved, many forced to march ahead of the Mongol troops as human shields. The city's celebrated library, filled with scientific, theological, and philosophical manuscripts, was set ablaze. Priceless knowledge vanished in flame. One Persian chronicler captured the horror in chilling simplicity. They came, they dug, they burned, they slew, they looted, then they left. Next, the Mongols turned towards Samarkand, the crown jewel of the empire, home to nearly 500,000 people and defended by over 100,000 soldiers. It was believed to be impervious to conquest. It endured only 5 days. Once the walls of Samarkand were breached, its defenders were slaughtered in mass. Skilled craftsmen were enslaved, while a vast number of civilians were ruthlessly exterminated. The city, once a shining light of Islamic architecture, knowledge, and art, was left in ruins. News of Samarkand's fall sent shockwaves through the empire. morale collapsed. Shah Muhammad, gripped by fear, fled west, abandoning not just his citizens, but also his treasury and even his own family. This act of desertion shattered the last remnants of confidence among his generals and the people he once ruled. But the bloodshed was far from over. In February 1221, the city of Merv, one of the most vibrant cultural capitals in the region with over 700,000 residents, stood in the Mongols' path. This time, the assault was led by Genghis Khan's son, Tolui. When Merv finally surrendered, its people were ordered to gather outside the city gates. What followed was calculated genocide. Groups of civilians were systematically executed by the thousands. Contemporary Persian accounts claim that each Mongol warrior was tasked with killing hundreds. Even the most conservative modern scholars estimate the death toll exceeded 100,000. Yet the most harrowing example of Mongol vengeance occurred in Nishapur. During the siege, Genghis Khan's son-in-law, Tokuchar, was struck down by an arrow. His wife Khan's daughter was grief-stricken and enraged. She demanded total retribution. When Nishapur fell in April 1221, the Mongols divided its population by gender and age, then proceeded to execute them all. The devastation was so complete that, according to reports, the land was later plowed as if a city had never stood there. Today, archaeological ruins still bear silent testimony to its obliteration. Entire districts reduced to dust, irrigation channels deliberately sabotaged, and farmlands reclaimed by the desert. This was not indiscriminate brutality. It was intentional obliteration. The Mongols didn't simply conquer, they erased. Cities were reduced to ash, agricultural systems dismantled, and centuries-old infrastructure destroyed. Many areas never fully recovered. Even now, large stretches of Central Asia remain sparsely inhabited, echoes of a once thriving world silenced by conquest. By the end of 1221, the eastern territories of the Khwarazmian Empire had become a shadow of their former selves. Its once grand cities were flattened, its people decimated, and its repositories of knowledge lost forever. Yet Shah Muhammad's torment wasn't finished. The former sovereign, who had once ruled lands stretching from Persia's highlands to the borders of India, was now a fugitive. Stripped of allies and endlessly hunted, he roamed in desperation. City after city denied him refuge, terrified of incurring the Mongols' wrath. His treasure hoards were depleted, his armies in ruins, and his legacy shattered. But Genghis Khan hadn't yet delivered the final blow. Understanding the immense symbolic power of chasing a fallen monarch to the ends of the earth, the Khan dispatched his two most fearsome commanders, Jebi and Subutai, with a force of 20,000 elite cavalrymen. Their orders were chillingly simple: find him, break him, leave no safe haven. What followed was one of the most relentless manhunts in recorded history. The Mongol cavalry covered up to 100 miles a day, propelled by their refined relay system, switching horses frequently to maintain unyielding momentum. No matter where Shah Muhammad fled, Mongol scouts would materialize on the horizon like ghosts in pursuit. Villages turned him away. Cities locked their gates. In a final act of desperation, Shah Muhammad boarded a vessel and escaped to the remote island of Abaskan, adrift in the Caspian Sea. There, isolated, battered by the wind, and forsaken by the world, his story came to a bleak end in the winter of 1220. Some chronicles claim disease took him. Others say exhaustion and despair finally overcame him. The sovereign, who once wore embroidered silks and commanded armies, perished in rags, devoid of power, honor, and hope. When news of the Shah's death reached Genghis Khan, his reaction was cold, deliberate, and etched into legend. "I am the scourge of God," he reportedly said. "Had you not committed grave sins, God would not have sent a punishment such as me upon you." The Khwarazmian Empire, once a dominant force on the world stage, was now gone. Yet, the tale didn't end there. A flicker of resistance remained in the Shah's son, Jalal al-Din Mingburnu. Unlike his father, Jalal al-Din was a skilled military leader and a bold fighter. In 1221, he mustered what little was left of the Khwarazmian army, and delivered an unexpected blow, defeating a Mongol detachment at the Battle of Parwan in present-day Afghanistan. For a brief moment, hope stirred once again. But Genghis Khan neither forgets nor forgives. Intent on eliminating every trace of defiance, the Khan personally led a campaign to crush Jalal al-Din. Later that year, the two forces met at the banks of the Indus River in a confrontation that would mark the final stand of the Khwarazmian Empire. Outgunned and outmaneuvered, Jalal al-Din's forces fell apart, but the prince refused to surrender. Stripping off his armor, he charged his horse toward the river, riding headlong through a hail of Mongol arrows. In a moment of sheer defiance, he leapt into the Indus and swam to the far bank, slipping through the Mongols' grasp by the thinnest margin. Watching from across the river, Genghis Khan saw the young warrior disappear into the wild, and in that fleeting instant, the great conqueror felt something rare: admiration. Turning to his sons, he said, "That is the kind of son a man should have." But respect did not spare Jalal al-Din's kin. Under the Khan's orders, captured members of his family, including his infant son, were executed. It was the final blow to a dynasty that once reigned unopposed. Jalal al-Din wandered in exile for years, a phantom prince traversing the Middle East, rallying scattered remnants in vain attempts to resurrect his father's fallen empire. His end came in 1231, slain by Kurdish raiders in the mountains far from the throne that had once been his destiny. With his death, Khwarazm vanished. In just 3 years, an empire that had taken generations to forge was obliterated, wiped so thoroughly from the earth that even its name faded from the annals of the world's great powers. Its magnificent cities reduced to rubble, its knowledge turned to smoke, its papala mere echo of what they once were. The Mongol Empire absorbed enormous portions of Khwarazm's former dominion, expanding with stunning speed and laying the groundwork for what would become the largest contiguous empire in human history, eventually spanning over 16% of Earth's landmass. But the collapse of Khwarazm was more than just a cautionary tale of hubris or failed warfare. It unearthed something deeper, a sobering truth about pride, power, and the unintended consequences of rash decisions. Never could Shah Muhammad have imagined that a diplomatic slight would set in motion the obliteration of his entire empire within mere months. Yet that single blunder unleashed a chain of destruction so immense, so merciless, that its impact can still be felt centuries later. Even so, amid the chaos and ruins, the foundations of a new global age were quietly laid. Ironically, the very conquest that brought devastation to Persia also sparked an unprecedented era of cross-cultural exchange, trade, and technological advancement. Historians refer to it as the Pax Mongolicata Mongol Peace. With the empire unified under one authority, the Silk Road flourished like never before. Goods, philosophies, religions, and inventions flowed from east to west with unmatched freedom. From paper-making and gunpowder to medicine and navigation, the exchange of ideas surged. It is a legacy of stark contradiction. An empire, forged in terror, also became a bridge between civilizations long isolated from each other. The same force that reduced Bukhara's and Nishapur's libraries to ashes later enabled the diffusion of knowledge across continents. And from the smoldering remains of Khwarazm, a new framework for global connection began to emerge. Still, this transformation came at a terrible cost. The Mongol campaigns didn't just topple thrones, they reshaped entire regions. Demographics shifted. Persian centers of scholarship migrated westward. Turkic groups spread throughout Central Asia. Trade networks were restructured. Borders were redrawn. The map of the world in 1218 was gone forever. It stands as a stark lesson. No empire, regardless of wealth, might, or glorious, immune to collapse. Ultimately, the saga of Khwarazm is more than a narrative of destruction. It's a grim but powerful reflection on the fragility of human achievement, how even the grandest of civilizations can vanish overnight, and how sometimes the most profound changes arise from history's darkest hours. So what's your verdict? Was the fall of the Khwarazmian Empire a masterstroke of military strategy, or was it, in the end, a furious reprisal for an unforgivable insult? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more shadowy, overlooked tales from the bloodiest chapters of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next episode of Nefarious History.